Hi, Karen. Welcome to this interview. It's so great to have you. And as we were talking about, you've been working on education for a long time. So give us a little bit your short version of how, of your journey. How did you start working on education, and how eventually in 1992, and then how did we end up here at the Socratic Experience? Like, what's your journey?
Sure, sure, absolutely, Joe. And it's wonderful to be here with you. And it has been a long journey now. It's over 3 decades long. I can't believe it. So I'm what's called a Montessori grandmother because children who I taught have now their children in Montessori.
Oh, that
Yeah,
has to be an amazing feeling.
that's amazing. Yeah, yeah. But it's really hard to believe, but it's been a wonderful career. Uh, I've been very privileged to work with amazing educators, administrators, marketers, business people, and the journey has taken me all over the world. So I've been in
Mhm.
China, I've been in Japan, I've been in Norway, I've been in Europe, and the States a lot. So I've been really, really privileged to be in Montessori and also to be in the alternative field of education in the sector of alternative education. My interest in education definitely came from my childhood. My mother was always awestruck about the world with us.
Mhm.
Learning was never, get your homework done, or it was always about really the beauty of learning. And it was a magnificent experience to learn in my household growing up. And when I was in my early teens, I thought about teaching. And when I was in university, I learned about the Montessori method. There was a Montessori school down the street from where I lived in university years, and I went there and I volunteered there, and I was amazed at what I saw because it was like nothing else I had ever experienced in my own personal education.
Mhm.
So the teacher was nowhere to be found in the room. I had to search around the room and see where they were. Off in a corner on the floor, giving a lesson to a small group of students. And the other children were largely on their own, working, choosing what they were doing. Um, a lot of chatter, a lot of talking, a lot of movement, a lot of discussion about planning what they were going to do together, deciding what they were going to work on. And this was just a wonderful, wonderful. Um, it was just so delightful. Um, it
Mhm.
felt, it felt right, that children would be in a classroom setting with beautiful materials, beautiful books, tables and chairs around, big spaces on the floor to stretch out maps and stretch out timelines and work together and decide what they wanted to work on from their lessons that were given, and that they weren't being directly taught. It's much a
Mhm.
discovery experience for these children in Montessori. That
Mhm.
journey led me to middle school. I was fascinated with the adolescent and their time and their place in their lives. And so I went off and did my adolescent training with some of
Mhm.
the most renowned Montessori mentors, Dr. Larry Schaefer, Pat Ludick, lots of um, experience and just life journey in Montessori that was passed down to us. So very much a legacy feeling of
Mhm.
pedagogy from Dr. Maria Montessori. And with that comes a great sense of responsibility to the
Yeah.
developing person, in front of you. So um, that took me on a journey around the world. And
Yeah.
I was approached by a group who was working in Shanghai to build a school. And then further, I went to Beijing, where we established the first Montessori adolescent program in China.
Yeah, which is
And
amazing.
Mhm.
Sorry to cut you off, but other than that, you mentioned that you were in so many places like China, Japan, a lot of places in Europe, Norway as well. Like
Mhm.
out of all of those places, besides starting the first middle school program in China, which is a pretty big highlight, is there anything else any other highlight from all of those international journeys that you save with care, like you enjoy?
Across all of them, it became um, increasingly important for me to uh, develop a focus on the parent.
Mm,
So,
mm,
from a parent's point of view, and it was a necessary, it was a missing piece for a lot of schools. This aspect of parent education or parent workshop series, parent talks, parent discussions, book talks, those kinds of things to bring the parent into the circular conversation with their child and the school, or the teacher, the guide, the child, and the parent. And I always refer to this as a circular conversation, where they felt that they were much a part of their
in the
child's
loop.
education within the school. Yeah. And I think that's really the piece that, for me, um, pulled it all together, because parents are struggling with the state of education. They're looking for um, a wonderful environment for their children to live in, and to be in. So what does that mean? And what does that look like? And then how can we be consistent at home? Or what kinds of things in my parenting can I do to support this journey, of this developing human being,
Mm-hmm.
that, they should be knowing these skills, or they should be practicing their times tables, but who are these young people at whatever stage they're at in their lives? And then how do who the adults, the teachers and the parents and the larger community, you know,
Yeah.
interact. So that was a big project that I
Mm-hmm.
kind of fell into when I realized in China that, of course, Montessori pedagogy with the emphasis on independence and self-direction in a Chinese household, that was sometimes at odds with the family culture of the household.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So eager to realize that children could feed themselves, dress themselves, direct themselves, take on tasks in the household, and be very much the owners of their own learning. So this was
Mm-hmm.
incredible. Um, and
That
then similarly with teachers, I did some teacher training in Norway. And for those young teachers to grasp uh, the liberation of themselves, to understand that to give space
yeah.
for the learner is everything. And
Yeah.
it's okay to feel that you have to have control of the whole classroom, or the assignment even, or how we're seated, or how we move around the room, or how we organize our schedule, that can be largely given to the adolescent with
Mm-hmm.
guidance. So to become a facilitator of sorts, of an environment where adolescents enter the program, enter the room, enter whatever prepared environment that we're at, if we're working on a farm, or if we're doing a science experiment, or if we're making lunch for 45 people in the kitchen,
Mm-hmm.
fully directed, fully organized, with the adolescents taking on all of that, and the guide in the background helping to
Yeah.
facilitate.
Which is one of the things that I really enjoy about DSC is how experienced different guides are. I feel like one of the things that I've seen you do over and over again is bring that element of thinking about the environment where kids can flourish even in an online space. Like how can we do that using online tools and in faculty meetings and in discussions around the way we do our own program. I want to highlight how well you do these contributions and reminders of, okay, we should be designing this environment where kids can be independent and can grow out of that. And also to highlight a question that I've asked, I've listened to you ask more than once, this idea of who is this kid that I have in front? Who is this person that's in front of me in this particular stage? Which I think is such a powerful question for us to use as guides. You mentioned parenting as and bringing parents over the loop, and maybe I want to ask you something that's not directly correlated, but you're a parent as well. You're a mother. As your so you've worked in education for a while. When you had your children, did it any did it change the way you look at education, or was it just a confirmation of I've been doing all of this over this period of time, so I know that I just need to implement this in my own household? Or having children change the way or somehow transform the way you look at education?
Well, definitely having your own children makes education on a more personal level. I think that's why I related to parents, because I was living it and realizing that I had these feelings at home, and if I had these, and even coming into parenting as an educator, it really is two separate worlds. In my experience, it is hard for a parent to teach their own child. Lots of parents say, you know, we try to sit down and we try to work out the math problems and it doesn't end well. And so, you know, I totally understand that dynamic because I lived it too. I think your question about did it change my perception of education? I don't think it did. Probably made it just that more personal and realized how important the small messages are, especially with the younger children, but I mean, actually equally so with adolescents. You'd mentioned you know, who is the learner, who is the adolescent? And that's at the top of our minds always, is what are the needs and characteristics of this developing human in front of us, whether they're 6 years old or 12 years old or 15 years old. And for me as a parent, it gave me great relief to understand them at their different ages and saying, that's okay, that's to be expected. This is where their mind is at right now. You know, they're not organized anymore. They're more rebellious now, or just understanding the developmental stage of the child. And I think that that's how the parent education in my mind grew, to say, you know, there are Montessori was a deep researcher and a student of developmental psychology, of Piaget, of Erikson, and she was enamored with stories of, you know, the wild boy of Aveyron, the child who grew up in the forest and could not develop language fully because of the lack of, you know, mother tongue, and these things fascinated her. There is a combination of science and humanities in teaching. We're really at this section of these two because we know more about brain development now. We know about the adolescent brain. And this highly informs our approach. And as you said, even online, for the adolescent, they are largely in a non-academic state. They're looking at the world through, you know, who am I? What am I good at? What am I good for? And they're searching unconsciously at first for mentors. They're studying adults intensely. So knowing this, what can we do? Well, we can put lots of wonderful adults in front of them with lots of wonderful life experiences and wonderful virtues and morals as their example. of what
Mhm.
it means to be a genuine person. Adolescents can smell a phony a mile away, and it's so true, right?
Mhm.
So to surround them with wonderful people who have a variety of experiences, I think that's what I see um, us taking advantage of at TSC, because of the guides who live around the world and come from different
Mhm.
cultures, different educational backgrounds, different life experiences, more so than you know, being in a community that is largely from their home base.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy for them to be able to meet all of us and to have a sense of there is this big wide world out there, and I know someone who lives in Portugal, and I know someone who lives in Canada, and I know someone who lives in Mexico, and you
Yeah.
know, another lives in Turkey, and I have a friend in Ireland. So these things are impressionable upon the adolescent because of where they're at in their stage of development, and that is their
Mhm.
worldview is developing, and their personal vision in context of that worldview is developing. And so
Yeah.
it is our job to put them in that context so they can take advantage of where they're at in their life.
I absolutely agree with you. And I feel like that's one advantage, once again, of having these online space is that we have guys from all over the world. We have students
Yeah.
from all over the world, and that expansion of the worldview just happens naturally because it has to when you're talking with someone that has a complete different culture
Yeah.
from you. And I love how you were saying that teaching sense between sciences and humanities. In my own class, when I talk about entrepreneurship, I say exactly the same. I think entrepreneurship has is a connection between sciences and humanities. So there
Yeah.
maybe there's a lot of things that stand on that combination. Let me ask you something. You talked a lot about adolescence. Let me ask you a personal question. How was Karen in her own adolescence? Were you facing these same problems, looking for mentors? Were you rebellious? Like, how was your adolescence?
Oh, uh, I would say definitely in adolescence, I was searching. I was really, I remember being keenly aware of people. I liked operating at a high level. I liked having real work. I liked feeling I had a purpose. Um, and I was very selective of my friends. I remember in high school, um, and I guess every adolescent goes through this, you know, who are my friends and what is my group? That was super important to me too. And how do I fit in and where's my group? Um,
Mm.
so so that was definitely um I was a very good student, but largely I found that the curriculum was not challenging. Um, and so that was a bit disappointing. But at that point, you know, when I was in the 80s in high school, it was just what it was. It was a system, and you
Mhm.
went through your courses and you got your grades and you moved on to university. So I was on that track. But I feel um, that I was always searching, and I think that's because there was something missing for me. And that piece, I think, was creativity. It was very
Mm.
textbook. It was very formatted. It was very, you know, answer these questions, hand in this assignment, move on to the next lesson. So uh, I I think when I look back at my adolescence, the highlights for me were my friends. Um, Literature was always a love for me, always, because I love the characters in the books. I love their moral dilemmas. I love you know, the just the art of the literature. I
Mhm.
often say to my students, it's called literary arts for
Mm.
a reason. It is an
Yeah.
art form, this writing. We can
What was your
appreciate
favorite?
that.
Sorry, what was your favorite book at the time? Like, if I stumble upon you on the hall in your school, like, what would you
Oh,
carry?
I took French literature and English literature in university, a double major in French, and I think my favorite was Madame Bovary. And I read this. This was the first French novel I read without having to translate everything in my head as I read it. I remember thinking, this is really cool. So, and coming from Canada, our bilingual focus throughout my education was we always had French classes. We always had a responsibility to both languages. So I continued that at university. And I think I remember just the awesomeness of language, and that I could feel, and how language is really cuts through all the cultural, identity. So when I read that first French novel fully in French in my mind, I remember really feeling that one. Yeah.
That's such an interesting answer. And the way you answered the different things that you were facing as you were adolescent makes me think of another thing that I feel like, because and I keep highlighting all of these advantages of TSC, not because it might seem like I'm doing a sell, but it's not. It's just because I've worked in so many places, and then going here and finding this is amazing. Like, most guides, I would say, make a conscious effort of reminding what was adolescence for them, and have that in the back of their mind when interacting to students. Because I feel like a lot of times teachers, especially in public school here in Portugal, that's like 100% of them, or 99% of them, maybe in the US is the same. Teachers are in that classroom, and they forget that they were once teenagers as well. And things like being extremely rebellious, or not paying attention, or worrying a lot about status and about my group and my friends, were things that they lived through. But they act as if, oh my God, these kids are so dumb or something. It's not. And one of the things that we do very well at TSC is just having that reminder and understanding that. So it's one of the things that I love. And sorry, because I cut you off. Back in your answer about adolescence, but maybe we can jump in. We've been talking a lot about TSC, but I've missed asking you one question, which is, what's your role at TSC? What are you teaching? What's your role in the organization?
So my role is I am the head of middle school, and so I interact with all of the faculty in middle school, and I am also a humanities guide.
And what's the class you're teaching, or you taught this year?
So I had two cohorts this year, one largely of a second year middle school, so 12 to 13 years old, and then the second one was an older cohort of 13, 14 years old into 15 years old. And again, those are really distinctively different points of the developmental stage of adolescence. So we explored, I would say, largely 19th century literature. It seems to really resonate in a very interesting way. A lot of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and we did do a Shakespeare, we did do Macbeth, Chekhov and Tolstoy, and Wilde and Nathaniel Hawthorne. These, but then we had Ursula Le Guin and Bradbury. Ray Bradbury is a big favorite of ours. And these are supplying us with, again, the developmentally appropriate match to this worldview aspect, and virtues, and purpose, and dilemma, and adolescents wrestle. They love to wrestle with big ideas. And a lot of these characters, Macbeth is tumultuously wrestling with an outer conflict and an inner conflict. They find this incredibly fascinating. And the adolescent is naturally at a very insightful stage. They have a very broad thinking, and they're very intuitive. So when you start to talk about someone in such a conflict, they see many sides to it. And so the discussion's rich. And our job is to back out of the conversation so that they can fill this space with all of this insight. And the way they play off one another is very real to them. This is very experiential learning, the Socratic format, which is another aspect which is very important to the adolescent learner, that it is real. This is a real conversation we're having. And based on things that are important to me in my life right now. It may be conscious, maybe unconsciously so, but they're drawn to this. And so those are the two cohorts I had. And we just continue to explore the human condition, essentially.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to explore the kind of teaching that we do. It's almost like you were mentioning a few minutes ago that you went to a Montessori classroom and you had to look for the teacher. Like, where is the teacher? All of these are happening independent. It's basically the same. You go into a Zoom call and children are discussing. It's like, where's the teacher? And then we're sitting there with our cameras on, just watching and observing. Yeah. So, what was your favorite moment during this school year? Like, is there any highlight, any particular discussion or book or moment with the student that you feel like was particularly good?
Great question. There were many. A Socratic dialogue is a really difficult task. There's so much. It takes so much. And I often, remind us all of the fact that it can be messy. There can be moments of long silence. There can be, getting off on a tangent. There can be monologuing, not dialoguing. And I think for me, the moments where the students have a project each quarter, so every 8 weeks or so, and they lead a class themselves, totally themselves. I become one of the classmates. They organize the class, they choose the content, they structure the class, they guide the class with questions, and then they have to go along with whatever is created in the class. So this isn't a set lesson plan. This is content. And when I get out of the way totally and I see them take on the class, it is the greatest experience for me. And also they often comment that, that was so much fun. I had complete leadership of the class. I had complete influence. I had to choose when to speak. I had to choose when to stay quiet for others. I had to wait for someone else to talk, or I had to interject and reframe a question or to pull the conversation back on track. These skills are, they cannot be taught. They have to be experienced. And so much of today is a lot of things coming at them without getting on the social media bandwagon. But, when you are scrolling through your phone, it's coming at you and you are a passive observer. When you're in a dialogue, you have to give space for others. You have to consider where they're coming from. You might even change your mind. That's a wonderful moment where someone will say, I'm going to change my mind because after hearing Julia, I really agree with you. And I think I missed something. It's like a paradigm shift. And it happens this gem happens every once in a while. And someone else will notice too and say, yeah, I didn't think of that. I already had my mind made up. So these things can be taught. And that's the best place to put an adolescent learner, in an environment where things are embedded in the experience.
Mhm.
This is true learning for them. This is true developing for them. And it develops in them an enormous amount of confidence and the
Yeah.
ability to risk, right?
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
art. Like one of the things that I
Yeah.
find fascinating about this is that you already mentioned this, but I just wanted to double down on it. Is that doing the Socratic dialogue is art and it's messy. Like I was having this discussion with Michael and Kevin because and you mentioned social media, and it's like when you think about education, usually people either they don't care that much, and so it's okay. But if you're trying to showcase what you do in a school, like you have, okay, so show me the brilliant moment of what you guys do. And I was
Mhm.
talking about this with the marketing team, and I was saying it's extremely hard because we're live thinking, and live thought is complicated and it's messy. And sometimes
Mhm.
you have these small seconds when you have a student articulate something so beautifully, and it's like, oh my god, that's beautiful. But the problem is that you and we can clip that and put it on social media, but we're missing the 20-minute discussion or sometimes 40-minute discussion that led to them to say that. And that's why I find what we do so fascinating, because students are thinking in real time, but
Yeah.
they're paying attention to the way they're thinking and to the topics that they're talking about, right? It's not that they're just spitballing or saying whatever they want to, is they're processing. I mean, you just mentioned some of the readings that you did in your class. I haven't read that book, some of those books, until I was in my 20s. So these teenagers with 11, 12, reading Tolstoy, Shakespeare, all of those, they're processing all of that and they're thinking about it live, which is something that I find fascinating. Is there I have one question, but I forgot. So let me ask you a different line of questioning, leaving TSC.
Yeah.
How do you spend your weekends? So give us a little
Oh.
bit a brief of Karen's personal side, like how you spend most of your weekends.
Yeah. We have a black lab, a dog, Wellington. And so we often take him for a hike.
Mm,
And we live in a beautiful region, right on the border of Quebec. So we cross over into Quebec and we go up into the Gatineau Hills often as we can. And there's wonderful hiking, but there's a lake, Meech Lake. So we like to swim there in the seasonal time, of course. I think my downtime, because it's so heady all week long, it's just nature. It's every chance I
mm,
can go to nature. So we have bikes, we have beautiful biking trails. So it's anything outside for me.
okay. So you spend so much time inside thinking and maybe in your head working on ideas that on the weekend you just want to go outside and get some physical exercise
Yeah,
done. That's
yeah, absolutely.
that's great. And I think it's a fundamental aspect of actually proper thinking. Let me ask you something. One of your interests is music, and music is one of those things where almost everyone likes music. So tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about that. Like, what are some of your favorite musical pieces, or bands, or composers, or artists? Tell us a little
Oh,
bit about that.
well, I live in a household where we have an extensive vinyl collection, let me tell you. So there's a lot. Um, we're big jazz people. We love like Kenny Burrell and all the greats
Wow.
of jazz. Um, my son is in music, our younger son, and so he has introduced us to many, many artists. Roosevelt is one of my favorites. I think he's German. He's a young artist. Um, but I grew up with seeing B.B. King and seeing Sting and the Police and Supertramp and um, those kinds of big bands. We love Coldplay, so
Mm.
we blast the Coldplay on Sunday morning while we make brunch and things like that. But we have the vinyl comes out on Sunday morning, and so we choose from the selection.
Got it.
Any.
That's a great habit to have, like a great tradition to have in family. On Saturdays, you'll pick a
Yeah,
vinyl and we'll listen
yeah,
to it. Yeah,
yeah.
that's great. And so we talked about music, we talked about books. There's one more thing I want to ask you on the personal level before we start to wrap up the interview. That is
Yeah.
movies. So let's say that you
Mm.
have the opportunity of having like this gigantic cinema room with teenagers watching a particular movie. All of them are going to watch it with extreme attention and maybe even have a dialogue afterwards. Okay, what's
Mhm.
the movie that you're putting all of those teenagers watching?
That's easy. Dune.
Dune, the
Yeah.
the last one, two
The first, well,
the first one.
both of the first one.
Okay, Dune.
Yeah.
Why?
I
I
think
wasn't expecting that.
the cinematography was amazing. The story itself, the journey of the characters, the societal aspects of it, the interaction with, what's expected and what's in the first one, his destiny of becoming, and when the father hands him his ring and says this will be yours someday, but you can decide to accept it or not. I think that's really amazing. And so it's his choice, which reverberates through me. My Montessori
Mhm.
maybe is that, I don't know. But the picture itself. And I watched the producers back story of how they shot some of the scenes. And I appreciated that it wasn't all green screened. That
Mm.
so that's something I would talk about with, if we had like a discussion group after. I think I would show that clip of the producer saying, okay, actually went into the desert. We actually had these big trailers that would pull the sand out, so the sand looked like it was caving in certain scenes.
Mm.
That's green screen. That's actually a live sand dune, like real sand dune that they're doing.
Yeah.
And so it gave me a great appreciation for the whole construction of the movie. So
Yeah.
yeah, so Dune's been my favorite. And then we just saw the second one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I need to watch it. I've been extremely lazy because everyone keeps
Oh,
talking
you
about the
have to
movie, and
watch
I'm
it
like,
out.
oh,
Yeah.
I'm thinking, oh, if everyone is seeing it, it's probably not that good. But I definitely need to watch
It's
it.
really
Definitely.
good.
Okay. Okay. So
It's from
Karen,
an
we
old
talk.
novel too, right? It's from
Yeah,
an
yeah,
old
yeah.
novel. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I think that was like this first version of the movie like a couple of years ago, if I'm not mistaken. But now this last one was a hit. And yeah, I definitely need to watch it. Okay, so we talked about your journey in education, and we talked a little bit about TSC. We talked a little bit about your personal life. And I want to end with two questions. So if you had to explain to a student why TSC would be a good choice for them, what would you say? That's the first one. The second one is if you had to explain to a parent why TSC would be a good choice for them, what would you say? So maybe start with children, then the parent, and we'll wrap.
I one of my roles is to consult with parents and their students about their choice whether to come at TSC to TSC. And when I meet with students and I ask them what brought them here at our doorstep, I often ask them to describe to me what would be their ideal school if they were to create a school, or if they were to walk into a building and that's where I go to school, what would it feel like? Not what would you learn or what would the teachers be like, but what would you feel like? Um, I think that's really key for them, because especially a young adolescent, um, it is largely their sense of what does this feel like. So when I talk with them, I say that we are online and there's limitations, but I'm really the reason I'm here is because I see connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I see connection that's broad, so that worldwide aspect, but also different age groups. And what is here for you is an experience to meet other people who will share what they're thinking with you. And
Mhm.
then from there, you know, we write, we do a lot of writing. We write almost every day. And the writing has become so bold and so beautiful, so rich, because of the discussions and because of what we're sharing in the Socratic. So I definitely, I'm gonna pause. Can you hear my dog drinking water? No,
No, that's
he's so,
fine. That's
oh
fine.
oh my
Look,
God,
Karen,
yeah,
we
he's like
should
lapping
leave
up and
this
feeding all
part.
of us.
We should definitely leave this part because this is exactly what showcases what it's like to be a guy. Is I'm in the middle
Oh
of
yeah.
an interview. Can you hear my dog? Like that's this is perfect. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, this happens in class and they're like, Wellington's drinking, isn't he? And I'm like, uh-huh. And like, yeah, he's really that. That was a huge tongue. Okay,
Yeah.
so what I say is it's not easy. This isn't going to be easy. In fact, it will probably be the most difficult learning environment that you'll find yourself in because it's so different. And then I
Mhm.
asked them why they think I might have told them that. And they say, well, to prepare me so that I know it's not just, you know, coming on camera and sitting and listening to someone. And I say, yeah. And why else would I say to you, this is going to be really challenging? And they say, because it has to come from me.
Mm.
Yeah. And interestingly, what have they told me about their ideal school? An ideal school would be where I get to choose what I
Mm.
want to write. I get to
Exactly.
choose. So there's a connection right there, right?
Mhm.
Um, I think that where we're going with education is in a really great direction here. And the fact that it's not easy means it's meaningful. When you have to strive for something, when you have to sacrifice for something, when you have to struggle to, as you say, express yourself, the voice for the adolescent is their most cherished personal vehicle. It's their self-expression. And so I say, you know, you get to listen to what others think and they get to listen to you. And one young woman I was meeting with, she said, that's so exciting to me.
Mhm.
And so I said, you know, from one class to another, we don't know what the class is going to be like. We have a text in common, but I don't know what you're going to say about the text. You don't know what
Mhm.
question I'm going to ask about the text. So we have to delve in together and see where it takes us. Maybe
Mhm.
it will fall flat. Maybe we'll be searching for the right question. That's okay. Um, so that's kind of what I say to them. And obviously this is a very passionate area for me to
Mhm.
see the expression from a young person because that's who it's about. And, you know, we say to them, you're not an audience member here. I love that line. You're not an
Yeah.
audience member here. So when I meet with parents and students, the parent is listening to this conversation and usually they have some questions. But what I say to them is, it's important for you to know that I'm not talking with you to see if you're accepted into TSC. I'm talking with you so that you can say to yourself, do I see myself here in this kind of space with the people who you're describing? And will this serve me well? Will I
Mhm.
thrive? And I
Mhm.
say to them, because anything less is a compromise. And don't accept compromise. Don't accept
Mhm.
that. And sometimes they'll say that, well, that's what I've been doing for the last 6 years of my educational life, is just compromising and kind of towing the line and going in with the system and everything. So I say to them, it's a process-based environment.
Mhm.
It's totally experiential. And sometimes things happen quickly and you see progress and you say, wow, that's so amazing. That's so insightful of them to speak like that. And then other days you think, no one's talking. What's going on here? But it's a
It's a
process.
journey. It's a process.
It's a journey, yeah. And it's developing. So
Mhm.
one thing we like to do is at the end of the year, we like to watch one of our first recordings. And then we all giggle because it's like, wow, we really didn't know how to do this at the
What we were
beginning.
doing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So those are the kinds of things we talk about.
Yeah, that's perfect. Well, Karen, I don't have any more questions. I just wanted to appreciate you and take you and appreciate you taking the moment to meet with
My
me
pleasure.
during summer.
Yeah.
To everyone else that's watching, either you're maybe an interested parent or an interested student, you'll find all of the information about TSC, the links in the description, and maybe you can schedule a call. Maybe you'll meet Karen and have the opportunity to ask her all the questions that you might want. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I will see you soon. Bye bye.